So here we are on another installment of Anything Goes on Time for Anything, where we are unscripted and just talking right off the noggin. Today we got James and I here with our friend Rohan.
Hello. So, I have a question for you guys. Not a question. I have a statement.
Go for it.
I think it's inarguable that today people are more skilled and more highly educated than they've ever been in the past.
More skilled and more highly educated than they've ever been in the past. I mean, are more people going to college than have ever gone to college before? I don't know, but also that doesn't necessarily mean that they're more skilled or more educated, because a lot of people just go because they're supposed to go because that's what their family says, and maybe they're not really learning as much. But I think especially with the easy access to knowledge because of the internet nowadays, yeah, I mean, maybe because people can just kind of learn anything.
This is sort of something that you and I have talked about.
We definitely talked about it in entertainment, the easy ability to learn things.
I mean, even before that, you have made a statement that you know more than your grandmother does, and your children will know more than you do.
Yeah.
But I disagreed with that just on the basis that you know different things. The example was your grandmother knows how to make sausages.
Handmade with intestines and everything, yeah.
But she might not know how to record a podcast.
Yeah, and I sure as heck don't know how to make sausages homemade.
Right. So
Exactly.
I think
Maybe the
overall,
distinction should be between skills and a general education. Is that
I get what you're saying.
yeah.
Because like here's
Go ahead.
I don't want to cut anyone off.
No, go
but
ahead.
here's a simple example. Take someone from the 1950s, and if they have a broken chair, and you can argue this a couple ways, but if the chair breaks in their house, I'm not quite sure that their first solution would be to buy a new chair.
Or call someone to fix it.
Or call someone to fix it. I think they have the skill set at that point to still repair a chair. And you can argue this, like, oh, the manufacturing of the chair has changed. You know, it's meant to be breakable, and you're supposed to trash it when it does break. Because that's part of the manufacturer's, I guess, like, strategy in selling these chairs.
Yeah, with almost anything nowadays, it's made to break.
Yeah, there's a...
Okay,
I
tangent.
forget the concept. Forget the concept. But it's this made-to-break mentality. They want you to buy a new toaster every year, so they only build their toasters to last 5 years.
So my initial statement was people are more highly skilled and more highly educated. Maybe the better way of phrasing that would be to say that people are more highly educated and have access to more skills, but are not necessarily more
skillful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the access to learning skills is undeniable, right? With the growth of the internet, the ease of information.
Yeah.
Instead of having to go find a book in the library about repairing a chair, you can just look up on WikiHow. You can have picture guide
Great site.
follow along.
Right.
Amazing site.
I think we nowadays have we generally have a better understanding of, quote unquote, how the universe works and our place in the universe and where we've come from and what we mean as a species and stuff. Talking about evolution of my grandmother, in a way, almost kind of goes over her head because she didn't really ever learn about that. And if she did, she was raised in a Christian household to whatever extent she was, so evolution wasn't really considered. So yeah, I mean, we get the world around us a little more in the macro, I think a little better, but yeah,
like a broad education.
A broader education on the world around us. But yeah, it's like you were saying, James, like, or Rohan, someone might have they just knew how to either make sausages or fix a chair, and nowadays we just want to outsource so much stuff.
So I sort of have a point related to what you said about understanding our place in the world or the universe.
Yeah.
I guess I'll call it a concept in philosophy that humans are on this road. And there's an end point to the road, and that end point is the understanding of the universe. And that along the way we might make pit stops and think, oh wow, we understand everything. But then we realize that, oh wait, we have to get back on the road and continue going. Some people think that there is an end point, that we can understand the universe, but it's also a possibility that there is no endpoint. We can't actually fully understand the universe.
Yeah.
Or
because
the
there's
reason
just so
that we're
many
here.
things. Yeah.
Right. So while we might be able to understand how the solar system works or gravity or anything like that, it's this sort of metaphysical cosmic meaning, at least personally, I think is not there in the end. That the road doesn't actually lead anywhere and we can't ever fully have understanding. So I think it's incorrect to say that we understand more because than your grandmother or past generations, because I think we just understand differently. And whether that is more accurate to the truth, we can't know because we can't know the truth. Capital T.
I understand what you're saying. I guess maybe I think about then nomadic cultures had a really good understanding of how to work their land, how to gather, how to move, how to be resourceful,
But I
how to
would say
hunt
that
properly.
that's more of a skill.
Yes, so they have knowledge in
Highly
these
skilled.
specific things, but they don't have an understanding of what's beyond Earth because they're just nomadic cultures.
Or let me give a more simultaneously concrete and abstract example of like
Okay.
an education. So like here's an idea. Grammar. Really simple, really easy to pass on. Humans innately adapt to grammar.
Yeah.
But for humans to innately adapt to multiple languages and multiple grammars is probably less frequent to happen naturally. I think that most times people have to truly like spend the time to educate themselves to learn a new language. I think that's something that today is more accessible and is more frequent. So that's like one part of my hypothesis that like people are more highly educated. One component could be because people are more likely to know more languages. As I don't know if that's true. I don't have stats on that. I can't pull that up. But just as an example, like something like really concrete that doesn't get into like the metaphysical, what is reality? Which I'd be so happy to talk about too, but on the subject of education versus skills. This is like one example that I think is a huge distinction between a skill versus just a broad education.
Okay.
I don't know, how do you guys feel about that? Does that make sense?
I get where you're going with that.
I don't know. I think it's hard to separate them, but
So education can teach skills, right?
yeah.
So would it follow that with a higher degree of accessible education, more people will naturally gain more skills?
So here's an idea I had kind of down that line was, and it's something that someone had said specialization. It was kind of like an alarm bell for me. I was like, oh, maybe that's why, we don't have to be hunter-gatherers with 14 different names for snow and know the ins and outs of how to skin a deer, because we don't need to specialize in all these unique areas. I can be a software engineer and learn a made-up human programming language really well. And that can be a viable skill in trade and career. Where are we going?
But that's the same as the hunter-gatherer situation, though. You're still specializing in a sense. I guess the distinction is you aren't locked into that specialization. You have the ability to, while you're a software engineer, also learn how to play guitar or how to...
That's an interesting... So you don't need as many skills, maybe. Is that what you're trying to say?
I guess you don't... It's not necessary to have as many skills as, say, a hunter that is surviving off of hunting, right? Because they have to know how to hunt,
Right.
know how to dress down the deer, know how to cook the deer. So in the case of the software engineer, they can get by with only the skills of a software engineer.
And then some generic education in like how to survive in society.
Yeah.
Uber
how
Eats,
to,
you don't need to learn how to cook anymore.
Yeah, how to microwave a bowl of ramen.
But either way, you need to know skills. Because...
Yes, but you're able to have a more specialized skill base.
Right, but
Yes.
don't we technically know more skills than a hunter-gatherer? Because using your phone, learning how to work a stove, work an oven, work a microwave, a computer,
I would actually break that
drive
down.
a car,
It's like-
those are all skills.
into like a literacy almost, like a language. I guess you could argue that they're all skills too, but
I mean, they totally are. Some people just don't have the skill to work a phone because they've never worked a phone.
I actually never thought about this.
So in a way, we almost know more skills as a species than we've ever known because of all the things we do. Learning
sort
how
of
to,
sort of a passive skill. Right?
but it's not passive. It's you're actively doing it. The first time I worked Grubhub, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have to learn this. I don't know how any of this works. It's a skill to learn how to work Grubhub.
Here's an interesting.
It's easy, but go ahead.
Here's an interesting compromise. So let's say you've never worked a phone before. The learning curve to using the Grubhub app would be insane.
Yes.
Right? Now let's say you do have some technological literacy, you do have an education in how to use tech.
Okay.
Using the Grubhub app immediately becomes feasible even if it's your first time using it.
Yes.
You could 100% order food if you've never used the app.
Right.
It'll just take you 10 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Took me a little bit of a learning curve, but it was a couple minutes.
So that's an interesting point. If we took you right now and gave you some understanding of how to maybe cook, and then we were like, okay, go cook this deer. It's alive. You have to kill it. Like, I don't know. The point I'm trying to say is like I think the education has replaced a number of necessary skills that would have like each stage of like feeding yourself, right? So you find an animal, kill it, skin it, cook it.
Yeah, we've weaned out certain
into like a
skills
broader
that used to be
education, which is
essential.
like more multifaceted. You can use this education in tech to build a career for yourself, to interact with people online. I think maybe that's a more interesting distinction between the two. That's visible to us today.
I don't know. I still just think that.
So I won't argue that using a phone, using Grubhub is a skill. I just think it's like a lower level, less like easily learnable skill if you have some education behind it.
Yes.
That's my point.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So then education does lead to skills, which I think is sort of an obvious.
Yeah.
But without the education, the learning curve for these skills, they don't become minor skills anymore. Right? They don't become these low-end skills if you don't have the education. It's more of a learning curve, and it's more difficult for you, and you'd, I guess, be more proud of yourself for learning it because you didn't have this base education underneath that made it closer to second nature.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, I would argue we know more skills than
as
we
a
ever
society
have
or as individuals?
As individuals and as a society, we know more skills than we ever have. Because learning how to play Risk of Rain is a different skill than learning how to play Halo. And yes, if you understand, it's like you were kind of saying with Grubhub, if you understand how to work a phone, you can work Grubhub. To a degree, it takes you a little bit to figure it out. And I think, yeah, if you know how to play a video game, it's a lot easier to learn how to play Halo if you've never played it than if you've never played a video game before. But when you think about all the skills that you have, if you really break it down into that small of a
granularity,
view, yeah, we know so many more skills than we've ever have. We're more educated than we. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, to answer your question from the very beginning, yeah, I really think that we know more skills and are more educated as a species than we ever have been.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
So here's my point in bringing this this whole discussion, like past versus present, I guess, is leading to, can we find a trend and can we predict where this could all end up in the future?
I don't think so.
Will we be a massively intelligent, super skilled group of people? Or is this kind of the max capacity, we're just about reaching it? We just need a lot more people to start working.
No, I think we're just going to move towards...
robots.
Yeah, computer integration.
Fair enough.
to the point where everything you do on your phone externally, I would imagine would eventually just be internal. It'll just be built into your brain.
I still think it's difficult to say that we know more skills than anybody in the past because it's just different skills. Rather than learning how to chop down a tree, you learn how to use a phone.
Right, but you know more of them. You know how to do more things in general than you did
Maybe,
before.
but not necessarily. Because somebody living in the wilderness is going to have a lot of skills.
Sure.
That the everyday person now wouldn't have. Instead, they have different skills, like how to use a phone or a computer.
I agree.
I would also add like one distinction to that is like let's say you make pasta, you can say like, I have a skill cooking. If you compare your skill in cooking to, let's say, Gordon Ramsay's skill in cooking, there's a vast difference. So I wouldn't say like, I wouldn't limit it to just the quantity of skills, but also like the quality and the time.
that's very true.
I kind of agree with James on this point of like, we're not necessarily more skilled because people of the past would just spend a lot more time on perhaps fewer skills.
Yeah. And
but they would still
really
own them
those
to
skills.
an incredible,
Right.
I would assume. Yeah.
And I also don't think, ordering on Grubhub is a skill. I think using the phone is a skill.
No,
Sort of like Rohan has said,
Vernacular.
if you've used a phone, you're going to have an easier time ordering on Grubhub.
But it's still a skill.
I don't think it is.
How is it not a skill?
Because
It's learning how to
Learning-
do something.
what
That's
learning
a
the
skill.
phone, learning
Well,
how
yeah,
to use
define
the
a skill,
phone
right?
is a skill, right? You learn how to use your phone. You can reasonably. What's the word I'm looking for? Operate. Yeah.
There you go.
Well,
Reasonably operate
Okay,
a
so
skill.
a quick
or a phone.
Google definition: skill is the ability to do something well. So if you know how to do something well,
If you know how to use a phone well, you're going to know how to use Grubhub.
right, but you can break that down into a million different things. You know how to use this app and this app and this app and
I
this
feel
app.
like that cuts both
You
ways
know how
though.
to
Because
tie
then,
your sh-
Yeah.
then when you have like, let's say, I don't know anything about it. Let's say you know how to cut wood.
Okay.
You could say, I know how to cut oak wood, I know how to cut spruce wood, I know how to cut maple wood, I know how to cut branches of this diameter, logs of this diameter.
I guess to see your point, like you could almost just go
Yeah,
into
it
it
kind of
indefinitely.
it's just like pieces of sand in a pile. I don't know. I don't think it's a metaphor.
I think it's more useful to look at the broader skills, like using a phone, than to narrow down on I know how to use Grubhub, I know how to use Uber, I know how
Fair
to
enough.
use Reddit, I know how to, because it all falls under the same category of using your phone.
But you know how to
I would say that's even just technological literacy.
You know
It's
how
a
to
skill.
pay your
Yeah.
insurance. You know how to drive your car. You know how to tie your shoes.
Yeah.
You know how to, I don't know, work a piece of machinery that's in your house or repair your computer.
You actually bring up a really interesting point with the whole insurance thing. I actually think that our social intelligence and our ability to operate in society, if you think about it, we're living the most complex societies ever created. I would think.
Yeah,
today.
I would think I would generally agree.
And so in order to be a part of that and not be part of some like fringe group or, outsider, there is some baseline societal education that you need to integrate.
Yes, I
And
live on my
maybe-
own currently, and if I didn't know how to do certain things, I
Yeah,
wouldn't be able to live alone.
Yeah, no,
Right.
exactly.
But I still don't think it's fair to say that we know more skills than anybody in the past, because there are past societies that people had to have skills, societal knowledge, social intelligence to live in those societies, that if we were whisked away to those societies, we wouldn't be able to live in, because we don't have the skills to live in them.
Right, but that doesn't mean we still don't know more skills. Just
just-
because we
I-
don't know the skills that they did doesn't mean we
Right.
don't know more skills.
But I don't think that you can objectively say that you know more skills.
I still
Objectively.
just disagree.
And okay. I just don't think that that's an objective fact, because you don't know the skills that those people knew. You don't even know what they like. You don't have the knowledge of the skills. Not you don't have the skill.
No, I
but,
see what
you
you're
don't
saying. You
know
don't
what
know
the
the skills that they had.
Right.
And I definitely agree. I still just think that there are so many different things that we as people currently in our society have to know how to do.
Yes, I agree, but I think that there are so many different things that they had to also know.
Maybe a
That
good
we don't.
compromise would just be like the relative intelligence of the population has gone up, owing in part to early education, owing in part to complex
Right, but
societies.
define intelligence. That's the problem.
All right, I'm just gonna say if you're exposed to something that pressures you and makes you feel uncomfortable, you're gonna grow and become more intelligent in some factor or form. And therefore, because I was in elementary school and that was probably uncomfortable at times, I probably became more intelligent. But I don't know, maybe running around through the woods getting chased by a bear would have made me intelligent too. I don't know.
I think you just learn different skills.
Yeah.
I think that's all it is.
I kind of lean in your direction, James. I don't know. I don't want to make generalizations ever.
I don't want to say that we don't know more skills because it's entirely possible that
How
we
about
do.
complex
but I
skills?
just
We know more complex skills.
don't think that it's fair to say that we
do
objectively do know more skills.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I can understand your point of view. At least.
So what is the trend that we've seen from like 1,000, 2,000 years ago till now is a more skill specialized population with higher relative education of various fields without that specialization. What is going to happen 100 years from now? Is that trend?
Future is
that
stranger
trend
than
continues?
future is stranger than fiction, and stranger than the mind can comprehend.
That sounds like a quote.
It might be.
That's pretty
I don't
good.
know.
That's pretty good.
I think of a weird example where some doctor's offices have started to integrate VR into child patient treatment. So you go in to get a shot, and if you're under a certain age, let's just say for sake of conversation, you're 5 years old, and you have to go get a vaccination, you get the headset hooked onto you, and you're now in a virtual world that syncs up with what the doctor does, and the doctor syncs up their work. So, now you're going to feel a pinch, and it goes this little game, and it kind of helps the kid cope with what's happening. I wouldn't have even thought that would have been a thing 5 years ago. So I think that as we age, there are just going to be things that happen that we could not even predict.
I think technology will definitely grow, but back to your point, I think just looking at the trend of more education, more accessible education, I think it's fair to say that in 100 years, as assuming society is still standing, we will have even more education for children.
Yeah. Definitely.
Whatever that means, what it could mean.
Neuralink chips uploaded to your brain.
Right. It could mean teaching physics in 3rd grade because the children can actually understand it.
That's pretty crazy.
And then by, 11th grade, you're learning astrophysics and rocket science, and rocket science isn't actually that hard.
But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, some complex knowledge that we don't even know now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I were just watching Back to the Future 2 the other day. Unfortunately. And seeing what their prediction of 2015 was bizarre.
What do they say?
Oh, we don't have flying cars. We don't have hoverboards. We don't look like we dress in like a 90s punk. I don't even know. It almost looked like 90s grunge punk, but it was
like
from the 80s.
cyberpunk
It was
almost.
Weird. It was almost kind of like a cyberpunk world. It was really weird. And that's I don't know. To kind of answer your question, what's the future going to look like? Yeah, James, I think I agree with you. Our kids are going to be learning things easier because of whether it be genetic modification to children or a better educational system that teaches more efficiently and helps people understand things at a faster rate.
Here's where I want to take that. So you said genetic modification to children.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a skill someone has to learn.
Yes.
That is such a niche skill.
Correct.
So there's probably somebody who will one day learn how to specifically genetically modify children. And maybe there'll be like a counterpart that knows how to modify adults. I don't know, as an example.
Well, I think it will go even more macro than that. You'll have someone who can specifically modify your kid to be this way. We want our kid to be really smart in this. So let's go to that guy who knows how to genetically modify my kid to be smart in this.
You mean micro, not macro?
Did I say macro?
Macro is bigger.
I meant micro. Sorry.
Okay.
I messed that up. But yeah, so I guess I'm just thinking, you're going to have people who genetically modify kids, but then you're going to have different sects of those gene modifiers that are very specific in the way in which they modify your kids. That's pretty nuts.
Like you said, it's the future is essentially fiction. We can't know what the future is going to be like, just as Back to the Future 2 didn't know what 2015 was going to be like.
It's stranger than fiction.
Right. Like the movie with Will Ferrell. But
is that a movie?
Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell. Good movie, actually.
I should watch that.
Never seen it.
It's on Netflix.
Shout out.
I think, it's impossible to say that there's objectively in the future going to be genetic modification. Maybe there's some barrier that we don't even know about yet.
Yeah, some kind of rights movement that says that's
right.
Almost like the Orange Catholic Bible in Dune. What is it? Thou shalt not ever create a machine in the likes of man or something like that. So AI can never exist because they just ruled that out.
Yeah.
So we could do something
Yikes.
like that. Genetic modification's just ruled out. You never
Or
know
there's
how to do it.
some biological barrier that we don't even know yet. But my point was, we can look at trends with education and say, in the future, it's probable that people will be more educated. In the future, genetic modification will exist because we're working on it now, right? It's these trends. So that's where, Back to the Future kind of faulted.
Have
in a
you guys
sense.
heard of biohacking by chance?
Yes.
Biohacking.
You have?
I've heard of it, and I couldn't really I could kind of give you a minimal explanation.
I can give you
But go ahead.
perhaps also minimal explanation.
Okay.
Especially for you, James. Okay. Biohacking is essentially a bunch of people who DIY genetic engineering, perhaps on themselves, perhaps on something else, probably on themselves or other people. Because CRISPR is super cheap, and that's the technology that they use to actually modify
Really,
genes.
it's cheap.
Now it is, yeah.
What?
I mean, okay, you can't, buy one off Amazon
Okay.
for $20.
Yeah. But I see your point.
it's cheap enough that like regular people, if they put their mind to it, would be able to get a hold of, I don't know, enough equipment to make a lab and start doing this by themselves.
Wow.
It wouldn't be like, here's my tomato garden, here's my, 2-car garage, and I biohacking in my basement. Like, it would probably be like more of your life than that.
Yeah, I
But
can
it's
understand
something that you can probably and maybe a little bit too easily just accomplish. And so there's a lot of people out there who, last time I read, were biohacking themselves and just saying, like, what if I just toggle, these 10 genes? What happens?
that. That's insane.
Is it illegal?
No.
Nice.
There's no ethical consensus on what that should be.
Yeah, see, there's a
They're
good
ahead of the
example
curve.
of that. Something that's they're gonna have to set laws for that eventually. Oh, you're
Potentially.
not allowed to genetically modify yourself to do this.
But I could argue, just as it's my personal freedom to not wear a mask, which I don't agree with, but right, it's my personal freedom to biohack myself.
Yeah.
Well, here's a bigger issue: is most people will not biohack themselves. Most people will say, "You know how to biohack me. I'll pay you money to biohack me."
'Cause, I mean, they would
That's
think
true.
that they'd mess
And
it
so
up on
that's when the
themselves.
government's like gets involved. It's like, you got to stop doing this to people.
I can see that.
Yeah, and that's already something. Like I think I can't remember anything I had read that was details about this, but I'm like quite sure that there have already been like quote unquote biohacking kit companies that have already been shut down.
Yeah.
Wow.
There was something else in the news that was semi-related. Some other companies selling something a little bit suspect that
Well, who
were getting
was-
shut down.
Who is that? I really wish I had more information on this. There was someone who did genetic engineering on a child, on a baby.
Oh,
or
China.
a
China
fetus or
had
something.
2 children that they
I think that's
genetically modified.
what that was, and the person who did it got fired because it was claimed to be unethical and immoral.
Yeah. I think I remember seeing like the same article you might have read. It was like a male Chinese scientist who
Yeah.
got a ton of shit in the global community.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, you really, just ethically, probably shouldn't do that to a child.
Well, all right? I'm gonna be the devil's advocate. Why not?
Right,
Because
why not?
It's not
Yeah,
of
thank
their
you.
own choice. They didn't
Okay.
choose to be.
Right, but then you can go to the whole
Yeah.
antinatally train in which
Oh, absolutely.
the choice of
Absolutely
Giving-
on board with that.
having the kid in the first place was a problem.
Yes, yes,
But I don't
100%.
know.
But I didn't ask to be born.
Yeah.
But that's also not in my control. Once I'm born, though,
No, you do it before the kids are born. You don't edit them
Okay.
after they're born. You edit them before they're born.
well, but with biohacking, it sounds like you can edit after.
You could edit after.
So, so however they do it, even if it is before they're born. Well, so that's sort of where
It's
my
just
own personal
it's a little bit
conflates.
suspect. Yeah.
Because on one hand, at least personally, I say, let somebody abort a child, right? But the child doesn't have a say in it, right? So if you are anti-genetic modification towards unborn children, then you're also probably anti-abortion, but that's just not how I'm standing right now.
Yeah.
I'm more anti-biohacking for unborn children because either way, they're going to be born, right? And at that point, when the child grows older, they might think, I didn't ask to be biohacked, genetically modified, engineered. can I get this undone?
I
And,
guess
and
so.
You probably can't.
I mostly just think, I wonder about the benefits of it. Like, oh, your child has a probability of being born with this disorder, but if we mess with the genes in this way, we could help negate that or drop the percentage by a significant
I think
amount.
that's
I think
the
in
initial
that
market.
sense, that's
Yeah.
different. That's
Well,
different.
they're
in
two
the
sides
sense
of the
that-
same coin. It's like there's a threshold between improving your child so that they're not sub-average,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote, to improving your child so that they're above average, right? And that's a thin line.
Yeah, I think to reduce human suffering, a utilitarian approach is going to say, yes, genetically engineer or modify a child that is going to be born sub-average, as you put it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? From a utilitarian point of view, that would make sense.
I think from a pure utilitarian, you'd want to say modify every kid, pump their IQ up to 200, make them 10 feet tall.
Probably,
maybe not that tall,
but that could result in more human suffering, right? A lot of very intelligent people are actually very, I don't want to say depressed, but at least unsatisfied in a sense. So that would, in a way, potentially increase human suffering.
But correlation doesn't mean causation, so we have to wonder how true that actually is.
Maybe it's because they were smart and by themselves.
Could be.
Yeah, as a thought.
But maybe they're by themselves because they're smart.
We just have to make them another smart person, and then
Ignorance.
problem solved.
Ignorance is bliss, right? So following that principle, it's better to be average or even sub-average, because then you just have more ignorance, which means you have a higher level of happiness.
I want to
but
talk
then
about
again-
kitchen nightmares all of a sudden.
But then again, I wouldn't want to live as a quote-unquote lesser life form.
I mean, if you're ignorant to it, then why
Right,
wouldn't
if you're
it go
ignorant to it, then if you're that lesser life form, then you don't have an understanding of what it would be like to live as anything other than that life form.
Yeah, you probably even inherently believe that you're above average, even if it's like quantifiably proven that you're not.
Yeah.
And in the end, you would be happier as a lesser life form, probably, because you have this ignorance. You have this kind of, I don't want to say illusion, but in a way it is an illusion.
It's a shadow on the cave wall type of
Yeah.
vibe.
Some Play-Doh.
Some Play-Doh.
Yeah. Get some Play-Doh and play with it.
Wait, you know what I kept wanting to bring up is stem cells. That used to be such a huge abortion rights activist hot button issue. I've not heard the word stem cell therapy in 10 years.
Dude, you're so right. I
What
haven't heard
happened?
anyone mention stem
What
cells.
happens? Does it just not work?
I just think it's one of those things that people just move past.
It either didn't work or it got shut down so far that people just moved past it.
Yeah.
So to reiterate, the issue with stem cell therapy was that stem cells, the best way to get stem cells is to find a fetus, a very early fetus. They're all stem cells. You just grab a bunch and then you move on with your life. And so for people who are anti-abortion, this proposes a lot of challenges because they're already trying to defend the rights of the fetus. Now you're harvesting that fetus. That's not right. So there's a whole lot of news about that some time back. I have not seen
Are you
it.
saying that's not right, or are you saying that some people think that's not right?
I'm saying okay, my personal opinion, it's fine. I mean, like, if it's in the sake of science, if it's not, I don't consider, especially the point, the age of the fetus we're talking about. Like, we're talking about, like, the first few weeks of gestation.
Yeah.
Like, I don't consider that a person whatsoever.
Because at that point, it's still just stem cells.
It's just stem cells. There's no consciousness. There's no living organs. It's actually just a group of cells that are all just growing together. So,
Yeah, I think I would agree with you.
Free reign, harvest, whatever. It's kind of weird if you're doing
Free
it to
reign,
someone.
harvest, whatever.
Yeah, you should obviously get consent. Like, I can see a lot of ways people could twist this, but no, I think under the right circumstances, this is like a golden ticket. Get your free stem cells.
Get your stem cells here.
Exactly. No, but then where'd it go? It's not in the news.
Maybe it's
Because
classified now.
it doesn't sell anymore. Maybe that's why. You know what I mean? When the news reports on it, people are, that we've been there, done that. People don't care anymore. Maybe that's why it's not pushed out.
Yeah,
in the
actually,
mainstream
you're
anymore.
complete. The news cycle is a horrible place to try and place.
Yes, it is.
Is this
I would say-
relevant or not? That's a terrible way to do things.
I would say
Yeah.
go into Google Scholar, search up stem cells, because I'm sure that there's more modern research articles about stem cells.
I'm gonna do
such
that
as-
right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, because the media hasn't been pushing it to the forefront, there has possibly been so much progress with it that we wouldn't even know about because it's not popularized anymore.
Look at this. Stem cell therapy for cardiac disease. Stem cell-based cell therapy and neurological. Oh, wow. These are old. 2008, 2009. Nature, though. That's a great journal. 2003, 2010.
Can you filter by
recent?
year? Yeah.
This is just filtering by the most popular articles. They're all published 2010. Oh, 2011. There you go.
Here, since 2020. Yeah, there's since fatty acid metabolism underlies. What is that? Venetoclax resistance and acute myeloid leukemia stem cells. But so it's still, they're still talking about.
But that
stem
is becoming
cells,
so. I was looking for the article that's like stem cell therapy will make you taller.
This is
And maybe that's
mostly what I'm seeing from 2020.
PCR2. Wait, go back up. What was that?
Mostly what I'm seeing from stem cells in 2020 is related to cancer.
Function in human pluripotent. Oh, there you go. RNA is essential for PCR2, chromatin occupancy and function in human pluripotent stem cells. The pluripotent just means that the stem cells can grow into whatever organ or body part you want. The rest of it, I just see lots of terms that are used in modification, gene modification.
I mean, also a lot of it talks about cancer. Something about COVID here. It's
Well,
Wait, Rohan, I forget. Did you just graduate from Cornell, or are you about to graduate?
no, I graduated in May.
Graduated from Cornell. What was your major?
Electrical computer engineering.
Electrical computer engineering.
Electrical and computer engineering.
Electrical and computer engineering. Dude, that's mind-boggling. That's awesome.
Dude, so we worked on circuits, we worked on computers, and where you take that is your domain. It's
Interesting.
Lots of ways to use that.
Dude, that's whack. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be the guy who builds the first Terminator.
also another movie.
I can't disclose a lot of information, but I have seen some really interesting projects and things that you would expect to be happening with the tech we have available commercially.
I'm terrified as to what
It's not terrifying. You guys should know about this. I'll talk.
Well, for one,
I'll talk to
Elon
you
Musk's Starlink. Right?
Okay, let's not even talk about it. Let's talk about drones. Okay, let's talk about a flying autonomous vehicle.
Fully autonomous.
Fully autonomous. Let's make it a fleet. Let's put 50 drones in a formation. Right? These are small autonomous vehicles that are flying. Now let's take a company like Anduril, shout out, who is putting weapons on drones and is then completing contracts for the U.S. government. Maybe. Probably.
Maybe.
Unless Boeing wants to buy armed drones. Anyway. And I've already seen my dad is I shouldn't say huge, but he really likes to go on Indian military forums, look up what's going on with
Indian military
the motherland.
forums.
No, so sometimes he'll post videos of other countries. So he pulled up a video of a Chinese drone training exercise, and they had I want to say 100 to 150 drones all rise up in synchronization, do some formation stuff, and all land together. And I was like, this is it for people in warfare. Because if one of us had a gun, a couple months of training, and our goal was to, let's say, capture some territory that's being defended by 100 drones.
You did.
Yeah, I'm not very confident, but that's the future. That's where things are going. So they're doing a lot of things now. You guys remember Google Glass?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so that was, I think, the precursor. There's a lot of competitors
for
Microsoft
For those of us who don't know, those are those glasses that you'd wear that would almost like Tony Stark's glasses.
Like a heads-up display.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay,
yeah. So almost like a heads-up display on a transparent surface in front of your eyes. So there's Microsoft HoloLens now. There's probably a few others that I'm not going to get into. Anyway, regardless. So soldiers are becoming more and more tech-dependent.
External cyborgs.
Yeah, so far. So that's the way they're going right now. Because why build the robot to carry the gear when you can just make the gear and have people carry it still? Right? That's still...
Because it costs so much to be able to have a robot that functions as a person.
There also just isn't... maybe you could look Boston Dynamics, maybe. That's a really popular company if you guys want to look into that. Anyway, But yeah, it's not cost effective. You already have a military, and you're paying people to literally fight battles for you. Just give them the gear, and make use of those people.
Right.
Speaking from a purely utilitarian perspective, that would be your objective. I know we tangented so hard. I don't know how we got on this
That's
topic.
the point. We are on anything goes.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
I think in the next 20 years, you're gonna see people move away from anything other than like spec ops type capture and destroy, like
SEAL
top
Team 6.
yeah, like stuff like that. If a human body is not necessary and your objective is something more broad, like we're trying to have a firefight and like just push people, like something.
I see your point.
Why would you put people in there? You can just have a turret that's automated. That's real. That's real. That's feasible. You can do that now.
Yeah.
You can do that and save lives. It's there's so many factors that would just make you want to do that. That's already happening.
But
That's
also,
already happening.
you also, if your soldiers are not dying,
Yeah.
then you're still paying their salaries, but I guess if they die, you still pay the families. So, I was just thinking it's almost more cost effective to send your people to die.
God.
Well, no, I mean realistically, instead of paying them however much you pay them.
Well, here's the issue. I think the U.S. spends 140. I think actually I messed up the number. It's a lot of money. The U.S. spends a lot of money on each individual in the military. Losing one of those people is an immediate debt.
Right, it's
not worth it.
It's like
It's
a
not
company
worth to
investing in a new employee.
Yeah.
They'd rather keep that new employee than have to retrain another new employee and spend more money.
Yeah, we spend so much on gear, so much on training, so much on tech. Losing one person is almost never cost effective.
But if your military is trying to segue into a more automated and robotic form, you're still going to have these soldiers on reserve, and you're still going to have to pay them for essentially doing nothing.
Whoa.
So at that point, why wouldn't you just send lines of your army
a more humanitarian method would just be to say you're dismissed with honor.
Right, yes, that would reduce human suffering tenfold. But I'm thinking pure, and I'm not condoning any behavior that would risk people's lives for the sake of money.
I see what you're saying.
But
I see what you're saying.
But if you send these people out and they end up
they would
dying,
not.
then you're not going to
survive.
have to pay them
I
anymore.
truly believe that with really rudimentary technology, we can go into this too. I'll talk about AI, whatever.
Okay. Whoa. All right.
But like,
can I go ahead for a second? But
okay.
Remind me to loop back to
I
that.
think that with the rudimentary technology available to us, a human soldier has to be conniving and has to have some knowledge of their opponents. Like this is a crap AI. If I go when it's dark and wear similar colors, it won't spot me. Like some type of knowledge that gives you an edge. If it's a fair battle, you're losing. Because let me tell you, an armored piece of tech will take like 3, 4, 5 bullet rounds and will not suffer the damage that you will suffer from that same fire damage. That is, I truly believe like humans, unless someone has some revolution in like armor, we're gone. We're not fighting battles in person very soon. Not right now, but very soon.
Well, yeah, okay, so then I think about the whole cyber war AI thing.
That's another great example of like weaknesses.
Yeah, well, strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
So I already think that each major country, let's just use for sake of conversation, US, Russia, and China, I think that they already have AIs doing a lot of work for them.
Yeah.
So our phones right now that are sitting on this table are hot mics. They're listening to everything we're saying. But I don't think that there's someone sitting in an office. Like there's no way there's
like
one
Mr.
guy.
NSA, yeah.
Right, there's not one guy listening to Phil's phone, sifting through all the information.
No, that'd be ridiculous.
There's an AI that the US has to have, that the information from your phone, and my phone is all going to the same AI, and that thing's processing all this information. So I would imagine you'd either have the same AI or another AI that has higher jurisdiction that is eventually going to essentially be running the military. So
that's sort of what they did with wargaming in the Cold War era.
Yeah.
They had an AI that was designed to fight a war.
Let me
Yeah.
pull back the veil on what AI is.
Oh,
I
do
think
it.
you guys probably know quite a bit. I don't know, actually. I'm just going to define in my own terms and we can talk about it. AI stands for artificial intelligence. And AI, as we've built them today, is essentially based off the neural pathways that were found in the human brain that kind of
Correct.
forms a net of adding and subtracting voltages throughout
All
our brain.
computers are essentially just replicants of the human brain.
Exactly, but with some minor modifications. So
Sure.
instead of the analog neurological signal that we have in our brains, we have a digital signal that has these, not binary, but again, decimal weights applied to them. In essence, AI should be the method through which AI works is probably going to be indescribable, at least in the same way that our brain is indescribable right now.
Yeah.
How
I
how
can
it would
see
work. You can form. All right, whatever. I'm not going to get into details about that. But the way that we've programmed AI is essentially this: form a network of these. Let's say neurons. Let's talk about brains. Form a network of neurons. Give it a test, and each time it takes this test, give it a score. That score can help it modify as it does better or worse on tests.
Oh yeah, it self-modifies.
It self-modifies, and that's not a revolutionary thing. In fact, that's actually a very old idea dating back to the 70s and 80s.
Well,
Backpropagation.
yeah, I mean we do it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is when we talk about mature, nuanced, brilliant AIs, I honestly don't think those definitions fit any AIs that we have today. I think they're all quite stupid. And the way that we've trained them leaves them prone to error. In fact, there's a whole field of mathematics that says if you take a computer vision AI, right, it'll weight pixels a certain way to find out what's in the image. There's actually a method of changing one pixel in these images, or a handful of pixels, and the AI will completely fail because of the way that it weights these pixels. That is known. That's known and actually theorized and fleshed out. That's a whole field.
Now I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that the technology the government has is way beyond what's commercially available. And here's why I'll give you this this argument. I had a professor in college. Shout out to Frank. Hope he's doing well.
Frank.
He said to me that as of when he was in the Navy, okay, so this was about 20 years ago. Now, I could be wrong about this. It could be that he was referring to this is what's happening now, but he was in the Navy for an extended period of time. And the government is currently running on computers that are 256-bit operating systems. For those of you who don't know, we're currently running on 64-bit operating systems. And as of around 2005 or something, it was 32-bit was the standard.
I'm going to contest that heavily.
Yeah, you've said this before. Like you've told me this before.
Yeah, but he worked on those computers. He repaired those computers.
But I can't just believe with faith one dude's testimony about what he worked on.
Wait,
That's
here's my negation of that. And of course, I don't know a good way to have this argument, but here's the bit system that we have implies an instruction set that uses that number of bits. So 64, that's an expanded instruction set, or it could be a 32-bit instruction set with a larger data portion allocated to those bits.
Okay.
Going to 256, I don't know if there are supercomputers that run that high. If there are, I doubt their instruction sets are really fleshed out.
Well, yeah, you don't have a dude working a drone or a guy sitting at his desk that's running this kind of thing. If anything, the 256-bit operating system PC is the type of PC that the AI is running on. So whether or not it's one computer or several computers, maybe 5 or 10, I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just thinking that there's no way, in my mind, that there's not technology that's at that level that we just don't have access to. That's not commercially available.
I think it's pretty funny because you say that the government has tech that we don't have. But at least through the courses and the military people, like the generals and even civilian employees of the military that I've talked to through my college career, have all said that their tech comes from the commercial industry. They actually are pretty far behind commercial.
Right. Their tech.
I can actually vouch for
Yeah,
that
Yes,
a little
yes,
bit.
exactly. The tech that they're using, the tech that the people are using.
If you want to talk about like DARPA, and,
I'm talking about the tech
actual
that
research,
their
yeah.
AI is running on, or the programs that are running higher calculations.
But if,
that kind
if
of tech.
20 years ago they had a 256
No, hold up.
bit operating system.
I reneged on that
with
because I said I can't remember if that
Right,
was
okay.
20 years ago or if he was stating that that's current.
Either way, in 2012, under Obama and the Patriot Act, they were collecting information and storing it in these databases, and they said, we can't get through all this information. We don't have a way to sort through all of it.
That
They're
would
not
kind
gonna
of
tell you if
shoot
they
down
did,
the
though.
AI argument.
No, they're
Right.
not going to tell you if they did though.
No, but they literally didn't. Like,
But they're not going to tell you if they did.
Well, I mean, I would say two ways to look at that are like a lot of times the way the U.S. government works, and this is something I've really began to learn more recently, is a lot of times it has a bureaucracy that can organize and plan, but it doesn't have a bureaucracy that can actually accomplish a lot of tasks. So let's say like you're in charge of a department, you're like, oh, I want to reduce energy consumption in our offices. You go, how the hell do I do that? You know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like I manage
can't
people.
just
I don't
cut
manage
things.
energy.
Yeah.
So what you'll do is you'll say, hey, Rohan James, you guys run an energy company. All right, I'm going to put out a contract. You guys write me proposals. Your competitors are going to write proposals. And I'll just pick the best commercial vendor who can accomplish these things with a low budget in a low amount of time. And you're going to weight these things however you want. At the end of the day, you're going to pick that guy and you're going to say, hey, do this project, take this contract, finish it up, commercial, federal interaction happens.
Yeah.
So that's kind of bringing back to the point of like commercial products, commercial software, commercial tech being used in the government. That's how it gets used a lot. I'm not going to doubt the fact that the government research department probably has a lot of advanced technology, but what I will contradict is the fact that any of that technology and research is much or even at all ahead of university-funded research.
I understand your point. I still just think that if there really is a 256-bit operating system that's being run,
Sure.
again, it's only going to be in one specific area doing one specific thing. You're not going to have someone who has a computer at their desk that's running this. You're not even going to have the president using a machine like this, or even someone in the CIA. You're going to have these computers running military. I believe it would be used for military operations, whether it be the military AI, the cyber war AI that they currently have in place, or used for statistics or predictions. It's going to be used for something that is at. So let's just go down a little rabbit hole for a second.
I'm so down.
And let's just say that there really is a secret alien program and they are hiding information.
Some Bob
that we
Lazar
don't,
activity.
Right, some Bob Lazar stuff, okay? There's all this quote-unquote evidence out there for it, but it's not made public. It's not really released. So I think it would be kind of down the same path in which it would be so secret, it's so kept under wraps, it's so specific that you're not going to have someone who works in the government who comes out of college tell you about it because it's that private.
Looping back to the Obama administration admitting that they can't sift through all of the data that they have, you said that they wouldn't tell you if they could, but they told us that they can't when they didn't have to. Like, they didn't have to ever say, we can't do this.
But that's the fault of deception and lies. Sometimes you say things that didn't even need to be said because you don't want people to know
it could be a message other
You get that?
Yeah.
Like you've probably lied to someone and you've just revealed you've been overly specific in your lie or your explanation. It's like, why did you even tell me that? You didn't even need to tell me that part. Why are you making your lie so complicated? I can imagine that it would be the same way, in which they're saying, hey, we can't do this, so that no one even second guesses it.
Okay, well, here's another thought then. So kind of similar to the whole QAnon thing, this is a theory that you can't prove. I'm not going to try and equate them. That's ridiculous. But I will say that trying to insinuate that there are secret government programs, government people working on secret technologies, kind of I guess, rejects the whole idea of argument and debate because we can't even discuss those things because the whole premise is, well, no one knows. You know, so it almost fits under like the same categories as like,
Metaphysics.
metaphysics. Is there a reason for us being here? Like it's hard to really even discuss it just because the whole premise is, well, no one would know, right? I honestly, me myself, as I've gotten older, I would have been more happy to accept these types of things like even a year ago. At this point, I honestly believe that our government is, and like most governments and most groups of people, companies, Facebook, whatever, are just composed of normal people trying to just make a living and get on with their lives, and a handful of people who are really dedicated to, problem solving and the job and the, whatever the heck that they signed up for, that they're probably driving a lot of these initiatives.
Yeah.
But the way we think about them are probably a lot overblown and not really realistic to what's actually happening.
Yes, I can get behind that and I can understand that. I still just think that there's gonna be stuff going on within each government that's so top secret and so classified.
That's not told to the public. Guaranteed.
Yes, that's just a given.
Right.
Yeah, I would hesitate to say that top secret stuff is experimental technology, though. I don't think that that's a field that the government has the both knowledge and manpower to really dabble in.
We're spending so much money on military every year.
But you know how many soldiers there are,
yeah,
and how much they get paid.
And
that
how
takes
much
up so much of the budget.
And how much an F-18 Raptor costs, and our stealth bombers,
and every tank
so
and aircraft carrier
shifts
to keep those things maintained and running.
Exactly.
So the economic initiative or the presence kind of shifts away from federal more to commercial vendors who are like, yo, we're getting paid $100 million for a plane. Like, we can trick this thing out and make it crazy. So I think it does shift away from government then. If you want to talk about top secret tech, I think Lockheed Martin, Boeing, these are the types of companies where you got to look at and say, like, hey, like, you guys are working on some actually top secret programs. Mm-hmm. What are they? You're being
I think it mostly comes from commercial.
I kind of align with that.
Yeah, because the government
But don't you wonder if the government then just has contracts with those commercial vendors?
100%.
Yes,
every time.
they do.
Yeah. That's why I brought up Andrew.
I'm talking like that's where the secret stuff comes into play.
Okay,
I'm speculating. I'm essentially just spitting out of my ass right now. But I'm just saying, well, what if you've got Boeing doing stuff and it's on their budget, but they're making contracts with the government to, we're gonna work on this, but then we're gonna give it to you for whatever it
Phil,
is.
to your point, who the heck made nuclear submarines?
I don't know.
That is such a weird...
I'm pretty sure the Russians.
What company made those? Sorry, I don't want to...
Look up creator.
It was General Dynamics.
There's no way.
That's a commercial company.
Yeah, so GE came up with...
General Dynamics.
General Dynamics.
Have you heard of them before? I've only started hearing about them in the past year.
I was thinking General Electric, but General
They're
Dynamics.
even more low-key than Boeing and Lockheed Martin because they don't make commercial planes.
Yeah, so that's the thing.
They are a major
actually
government contractor.
the U.S. military.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and then you've got companies like SpaceX that are doing stuff that NASA isn't even doing.
But that's because these commercial... I don't want to say vendors, but the commercial companies have their own profits and they can decide to do these things. NASA is government funded. The government doesn't have enough money to fund these projects, which is why it's really difficult to get on board with, like Rohan said, the government having secret tech. It just costs too much for the government with the deficit that they're in, that it's more effective and efficient for them to outsource to commercial.
Wait, I have a story about NASA, but I'll wait till... I want you to make your point.
I'll counter that by just saying, what if that's why we have so much debt? What if that's why we can't fund NASA? What if that's why we don't have... there are a lot of other reasons why. We don't have free healthcare. And college is so expensive. I know there are other reasons behind all this, but I'm just saying, going down a hypothetical rabbit hole, what if this is why there are so many other bigger issues with finances in our country and we're so in debt? Because we're dumping so much money into the AI.
Is it possible that the government is spending money that we don't know about? Yes. Probable.
Yeah.
But I can't speak to what that would be on, and I think it makes more sense for the government to outsource this tech to companies like General Dynamics.
I think that's where the money is going. I think the money is going towards top of the line commercial who are just like saying like we have the funding, we have the contracts, we're just gonna go all out and build the craziest jet ever, call it the F, 420, and then send that out.
Yeah, so whether or not the government's actually building it, I think it's possible that a lot of our government spending and a lot of our deficit and our military spending is going towards this cyber war AI, whether or not it's the government specifically developing it or we're paying another company to develop it.
Our money, so I 100%
I'm
agree.
speculating that that's the case, that's why we have so much debt, that's why we spend so much money on military.
I don't think that that's the sole reason that we have a lot of debt or
it's
spend
the
so
sole
much
reason
money
either.
on
Right.
military.
Right, it's
but
not.
I think that, sure, it's part of it.
Yeah.
Wait. Let me bring this back to NASA. Because someone brought up
Go ahead.
NASA and
Yeah.
SpaceX. Okay, I just want to say, I spent part of the summer working with a decentralized group at NASA. They're called the Lunar CubeSat team, Lunar Cube Satellite. And so at Cornell, I was helping to design and build a cube satellite that would have gotten launched with their most recent spaceship. I don't even know if they've launched it because I think COVID delayed it, but it would have launched at the end of this year. It was a 6U CubeSat. 6 unit. I don't know what that means anymore. But six boxes. I don't know how big they were. No, so I sat in on a meeting that the guy leading the project had with a bunch of NASA heads. And they basically said, hey, we're delayed by 3 months on our end. So you guys have time. And he said, great, we're also being delayed. And the reason for the delay wasn't some bureaucratic crap. It was partially bureaucratic. But it wasn't inherently we're not getting permission to launch the rocket, or we can't get a hold of fuel. It was just we just haven't finished our work. That was literally it. We, as a group at Cornell, when I joined, they were behind. They didn't have people working on it. NASA, as a group contacting us, basically said, hey, we haven't finished setting up for this launch, so you have time. And at that moment, I said, damn, I would never want to work for NASA. This place is slow, it's bogged down, it's a bureaucracy. It's part of the U.S. government. If you're part of a government like this, you have people telling you what to do.
So much red tape.
To infinity.
Yeah.
And it's just how it works. If you want permission for something and it's not your immediate boss, you'll never hear back.
Well, that's the thing.
That's why it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. But in a government situation like that,
you might as well just ask for permission, or else you lose your job.
Yeah.
I draw a parallel there with game design. You have people who they might have been really passionate about this game as a kid, and then they start working on it eventually when they're older and they're becoming part of that project, and then you realize that it's not about what you want to do. It's not about your passions. It's not what you think can look right. You have to follow a certain art style. You have to follow what your superior's saying. There's like you just said, there's all this red tape behind it. These people working on these projects at NASA can't even actually do what they want to do.
They're literally just there to, let's say, code.
Or just do the work that they've been assigned.
Right.
Exactly.
They don't get any creative freedom with it.
Yep.
They just have to do the physical work.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a weird conundrum. You have I think what that workplace sets up is, Phil, you are the visionary. You are the boss. Me and James, we're just your code monkeys. That's what we're called in the software engineering world.
Sure.
You tell us, we need to come up with a way to, I don't know, shoot lasers at other satellites to let them know we're here, as an example. And we go, there's a few ways we think about doing that. And you go, no, we're using this piece of hardware connected to this other piece of hardware. That makes no sense, but that's where we're hooking it up. And you need to figure out how to do that in,
a set amount of time.
Yeah, some amount of time.
A month. Whatever.
And it needs to work under some specified speed. And that's what I'm asking of you. And that is where the creative process goes away. I would say software engineering, like writing code, is a bad example because, is your artistic freedom really being, restrained in that case?
Okay.
No, I don't know if I'd make that argument right now. Maybe in a couple decades, but not right now. I don't know. It's a weird conundrum of you have a lot of money and a lot of manpower, but that is holding you back if you're the federal government trying to do something. I think that happens to a lot of companies too. Was it? I think it was you I used to talk to about what if Facebook or Google or Apple or like one of these big tech companies, like hundreds of millions of dollars, just said, you know what? This is a huge tangent, by the way. What if we went to Madagascar and just took it over?
Yeah,
Or
they could do it.
some small
Yeah.
economy country,
That's-
and we're like,
that's
we're just
so-
gonna put money in this country
like
and
what
take
China's
it over.
doing with Africa.
Yeah, essentially the Silk
Yeah.
Road project.
you
and
could
like,
just
yeah.
You could just have
But then
Apple
it's-
take a country
But then
and
it's commercial businesses doing it. It's not a country doing it. It's
What's
not
the,
a
what's
government.
the, what's the
it's
difference
Facebook
in the
doing
long
it,
run?
or-
Apple can't raise taxes. That's it. If they took
Well-
Madagascar, they'd be able to raise taxes.
I
Yeah,
think the thing
yeah.
is though is that if you've got a commercial company do it, it could be easier to stop it, simply because if you've got China who decides that they're going to take Madagascar,
Well, why
if you
why
wanna
is that?
counter
Why
that-
can't you stop China?
no, hold on, because then you got to go to war with all of China.
Not
Because they have a
necessarily.
military, right?
Well, that's true, but
So
let's
if
just say
Apple
Apple
had-
creates their own military.
Apple had mercenaries.
Sure,
What separates them from a country?
there's in my mind it's only just that they're smaller.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Potentially.
That's it.
Potentially,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah, that's
But
true.
not necessarily.
Potentially,
I mean,
That's
Apple
Yeah.
could be just as large as China.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true. That's terrifying.
Apple could just buy China's military. and like,
You know, that's such a good point. Is I wonder if or in my mind more likely when a private industry is gonna really just decide that they're a military.
You already have private mercenary outfits.
You do, yes.
So what is to stop those private contractors from partnering with private companies, buying their contracts,
Yep.
and creating a private military?
Creating a private. And
I mean, not like that's not already happened, but that's primarily been used for protection.
Yep.
When that's used
for
to
oil rigs and
yeah,
things like that.
when you
Right,
start
yeah.
saying, okay, instead of protecting the oil rig, we're gonna capture those 5 towns around the oil rig. who is gonna step in and say like, okay, no, we're on
Probably
this.
America, because we gotta
No.
be the
Not anymore.
No.
We
Not for the
gotta
past
rule
40 years.
everything, because for some reason America gets involved in
They wouldn't.
everything.
They wouldn't though. They
No,
wouldn't
they're
stop
out.
it.
They're out of
Why
there.
would they?
I
Yeah.
hope not.
If it doesn't interest
It would
them,
especially be
they won't
confusing if
stop
it was American mercenaries.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
true.
Then they'd go, what do we do?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
No,
I think that's an
any,
open door.
Any government, whatever any government does, is in the interest of that government.
Yes.
Governments don't do things utilitarian, altruistically.
Yeah.
They don't just stop Apple from invading Madagascar because they feel like it.
Right.
They stop Apple from invading Madagascar because they have investment there.
Sure.
So why hasn't Apple, quote unquote, invaded Madagascar?
There's no need to. They're making enough money as is.
Yeah, they're
They
in
don't-
their niche. They do their thing. There's
They
no
have-
reason currently for them to go outside.
They have
of
their
that.
hands in the governments that they want to have their hands in, and that's probably as far as they want to go with it. Why complicate it?
Especially, yes, because I'd like to think that if Apple just decided that they were going to do that, they'd probably lose a lot of customers.
No. Did Nestle lose any customers when
For
they owned,
killing
for
Africans?
killing Africans and owning the water supply for like 50% of the
A
world?
little
No.
bit sus.
They maybe lost a fraction of a fraction
I
of
guess
their
I see.
customers,
They
but
did
nobody
kill
cares.
a few of their customers.
Because either number one, it's not.
Are you talking about the whole like breastfeeding thing?
Well,
Yeah,
that's part of it, but they
Okay,
also
okay.
own water supplies. That,
I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they own water
Interesting.
supplies, and they don't allow villages that need those water supplies to live. They don't allow them the water unless they pay Nestle, which obviously they can't. But
Wow.
shit, there was a
That's
point
so
that I was
sad.
gonna make.
Sorry.
It's so sad.
No, you're fine. Why?
Nestle sucks.
People won't stop going to Apple after Apple invades Madagascar because either number one, they won't hear about it in the news.
More likely.
Number two, they won't care enough
Less
because
likely.
because Fox News says that it's okay, so everybody that likes Fox News is just on board with it being okay. So I think there's a plethora of reasons that only a fraction of the consumer base would actually care.
Let me chime you into something that's been growing. Cancel culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a great idea. How do you guys feel about cancel culture?
That's an entire paradigm shift on the conversation, but I don't really
But not
give
really.
a single shit.
Not really.
If we canceled
It's not-
Nestle, if we canceled
Yeah.
Apple for
Okay,
doing
I see
some
where you're going
weird
with that.
stuff,
Yeah,
quote unquote canceled.
I can get on board with it if it's actually justified.
what does cancel culture mean to you? What does canceling someone mean to you? That is the distinction that we have to make first.
What does canceling someone mean to me? I guess see, this is actually kind of interesting because I don't know if this was a few weeks ago or months or whatever, but someone, it might have been Derek, actually, our other member, who mentioned cancel culture, and I had no idea what he was talking about. Just because I'm so out of touch with social media, I was like, what do you mean? What is cancel culture?
More power to you.
So I guess my understanding of it now is the idea of, so for example, let's just say Nike puts out something that you disagree with. You quote unquote cancel Nike. You now don't support their products. You don't do anything with it. You won't buy anything with them. Is that kind of how it works? So if you just decide you're going to cancel Kanye West, you just decide you're not going to support him at all?
That's more
Part
individualistic.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
more based on the individual. I think that concept has been around for a very long time. If a restaurant serves you bad food or has bad service, you're not going to go back to that restaurant.
Right.
In your
Almost
mind,
like
you cancel that.
Yeah.
But in terms of cancel culture, it's more about outcasting. I don't want to say content creators, but just people from society or organizations,
Almost
right?
as if you're banishing them.
It's like
Yeah.
a boycott that a group enforces.
Right.
Yeah,
it's
so
more
it
than
starts
just
with the
one
individual, but then
person.
it becomes a movement,
So
essentially.
I decide Phil needs to be canceled. James, you need to stop talking to Phil. That is cancel culture.
Right,
In a nutshell.
okay.
I
Okay.
found an issue. James needs to stop talking to Phil.
So you
And
kind of
a
push
lot of
that on
times-
everyone else.
A lot of times, the proponents or the people
Canceling.
canceling are people that have a follower base on, let's say, social
Okay.
media or streaming, that sort of idea of you have people that will listen to you and actually follow along with your canceling.
Pretty corrupt view of cancel culture.
Is it?
I don't know. What if I was like, hey, James is like a rival in our Minecraft YouTube series. You know, like he also gets 40 views per video. I get 40 views per video. You know what? James, chopped down
You
too many
choose to
trees
cancel them.
in his video.
Yeah.
Time to cancel James.
No, and I think that's how some people use it.
That's actually kind of. I shouldn't say that. I've never known cancel culture to be used in that way, but it's an interesting
I think that's how it can be.
variation of like mob rule, which
I
is
think,
cancel
I
culture.
think that's a way to misuse it.
Yeah.
I think that in some instances, for example, there was a streamer, Dr. Disrespect.
Oh, yeah, you
who
got totally locked out of Twitch, right?
He did. He's back now.
Oh.
But he did get...
Is that the guy with the bald head?
I don't know.
No, he's some dude he's got like a mustache, has glasses
Yeah.
or something.
And
I
what
just know
happened
'cause I
was
saw it on Google
he
News.
cheated on his wife,
Yikes.
supposedly. I don't
Well,
know if it
that's
was ever confirmed,
unfortunate.
but he cheated on his wife, and people canceled him. They, as a mob, as a group, said, we will no longer support this person based on their actions or
Well, if
what
your
they
name is
said.
Dr. Disrespect, I think you're also setting yourself up for people not liking you, but that's
No, a
just
lot of
my
people
point.
liked
Anecdotal.
him.
No, I know, but,
his name was more of a kind of nod to how good he was at some games.
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
But I think cancel culture is a dangerous thing. Like I said, I think it can be misused, but at the same time, when somebody is blatantly racist or does something that they shouldn't do, it maybe is okay to cancel them.
Yeah.
In that sense, right? To as a group say we are no longer going to support you based on what you've said, done, or whatever it is.
So I think there's a few ways to look at this. One is cancel culture reacting to a current event. Like Rohan does something heinous and vile, we're going to cancel him. Okay, that's warranted. How about this? Rohan in 2005 does something heinous and vile. That is a bigger question of, is that worth canceling? What are the circumstances? Has he changed? And that is a deeper conversation about should you be held accountable for past actions? I think the question of like cancel culture, the way that it's enacted, mob rule, there isn't a lot of critical thought that goes into those types of decisions.
That's much more philosophical than.
But that conversation would never happen. In fact, I think there are toxic people. This is a hypothesis that there are toxic people who enjoy finding ways to degrade people based on past actions. And though I don't know if we even have statistics on this, I think that in my experiences with social media and what I've seen in social media news, I think this is an ongoing trend. And so I hesitate to really accept the net benefits of cancel culture, knowing that there are people that are going to be held accountable. Again, for past actions, they should be held accountable, but perhaps not in the way that cancel culture operates.
I agree, because I think I've done or said things when I was younger.
Oh yeah.
That if you judged me, all right, think about it like this. Derek was mentioning the other day. He said, "Hey, I know a person from high school that actually that he still associates with, and he said he'd really like to catch up with you and see how you're doing, and he'd like to get together." And my first thought was, well, this guy was not nice to me in high school. This guy talked me on my back. He treated me pretty horribly. But then my second thought was, well, if I judge him based on the way he was in high school, and I just don't think that's fair, because if someone judges me presently based on the way I was in high school, they don't know me at all. They don't know who I am right now as a person at all. Go ahead.
I think the difference here is your high school self is radically different than your adult self. But most people's adult self doesn't change that drastically over the years. For example, the Canadian Prime Minister who wore a blackface at a Halloween costume party was, that found out about and held responsible for his actions. He was an adult with conscious decision making, with the knowledge of right and wrong, with the knowledge that any adult would have. He, in that instance, should be held accountable for something that he chose to do as an adult, because he is an adult who should understand right from wrong. A high school student, though, doesn't necessarily have that capacity for understanding. They do in some regard, in the sense that they know that they shouldn't kill somebody, but for most of their actions, I think that as you kind of hit this transition between adolescence and adulthood, you go through a radical change, as opposed to when you're an adult, you don't change as much.
Let me propose a counter. So the Washington football team has been made fun of a lot this year for their recent name. But prior to that...
What is their name?
Football team.
They're just called the Washington football team.
That's all they're...
That is their
because
name.
They're not the Redskins anymore.
Yeah.
Ah.
So let's say 15 years ago, I'm a Redskins fan. I wear a headdress and I go to the game with a fake tomahawk, and I don't know, I whoop and cheer, and video or photos are taken of me, blah blah. Today, if you were to pull those up, those would be considered heinous and probably vile. Based on the direction that the Washington football team has gone, under the same lens, that is ridiculous. That is incredibly racist, incredibly derogatory, and incredibly mean.
But at the time, it was a societal norm.
Yeah, but at the time, I think if you were to dress up like that in 2005, you would be one of a couple of hundred, I shouldn't exaggerate, one of at least a few people dressing up like that to show
thousands, probably.
Spirit. Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. There is some perspective that you have to carry over and say, hey, dressing up in black. I'm not gonna contest this, by the way. It's a good thing ever.
Right.
But dressing up in blackface at the time, the negatives associated with that may not have been as, I guess,
controversial.
I think society as a whole wasn't as progressive and acknowledging that this was a problem.
Sure.
At the time, you do it. You feel kind of wrong about it.
It was a societal norm. It was acceptable.
Yeah, but you weren't you didn't walk out the house and get yelled at. It was like an accepted feature of society.
I think
holding people accountable by our standards today to what they did back then. Yeah, there is some there's some level of shame. Like, hey, do you really think that was a good idea? Should you have done that? Okay, yeah, I think it's a great conversation to have. But just going straight to, hey, obviously you hate black people, you're a racist, I think that is a judgment that you should spend a little bit of time deliberating before jumping to.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, yes, I agree. And furthermore, I do think that maybe we need to be a little more lenient as a society with our cancel culture. So maybe it's, let's say you do something that's considered racist or heinous or vile, you almost kind of get a slap on the wrist and kind of like a probationary thing, in the sense, depending on how bad the thing
is.
Is
this like what you're visualizing?
Yes, I'm saying maybe this is what we should do.
Okay.
Is depending on how bad of a thing you did, there's sort of like a slap on the wrist probationary thing, in which you can go, well, you might lose a following, and yes, we disagree with you, and yeah, you get in trouble, but you're allowed to be forgiven if you apologize, but you're not going to just be forgiven and it's not going to be forgiven and forgotten. Unfortunately, that's not how people work. But I think you can't just shut someone down entirely based on one thing they do.
I think if you're
depending on what they do.
I think if you're talking legally in a court system,
yes,
that makes sense.
I agree.
But when you talk about mob mentality and the way that people just react to things, that's not a realistic.
No, it's not a realistic. No, I just wish that that's how we were. I wish we were a little more forgiving and lenient, because the thing is that you can be upset. You can have an initial reaction and be upset with the thing that someone does, but you have to understand it's like you were both saying, is you're not gonna be the same person in a few years. And I know that as an adult, it's different compared to what I did in high school compared to what I am in my mid-20s. Or what I did when I'm 30 compared to what I did when I'm 40. I know there's a difference because you're an adult, but we have to remember that people are raised in different cultures and they're raised in different time periods, and unfortunately, like, no one's going to be perfect, and they're still learning how to adapt. So I don't know. I still just think that it's okay to be upset with someone and to decide that you're not going to support them, but to entirely shut someone down because they did something isn't necessarily fair, again, depending on what they did.
I just think that, as adults, we should be mindful of how we portray ourselves.
Exactly.
And what we say about other people.
Most
and how we act. So I understand cancel culture in the sense that when somebody messes up pretty hard.
Some R. Kelly shit.
Right. Like, when they mess up, then the natural reaction for the bulk of people is to say, wow, that was pretty messed up.
Yeah.
And they might just individually decide to no longer support them.
Yeah.
But that turns into cancel culture.
Yeah.
Because you have the bulk of that person's listener base just deciding no longer to support them.
Can you imagine if the whole Kanye Taylor Swift thing happened now?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I honestly, it was when at the Grammys, Kanye West interrupted Taylor Swift's award to say
she doesn't deserve this.
Yeah, essentially, she was like, "I'm gonna let you finish in a minute, but Rihanna should have won this award."
Oh, it should have been Rihanna. Yeah, that's what he said. It should have been Rihanna, not Taylor.
Which is hilarious in 2020, but yeah, if it happened now. I mean, I don't know. Kanye was at the top of the world at the time too, so people kind of saw that and were like, "Wow."
I don't know. And again, James, I totally understand what you're saying. Is that there's this initial knee-jerk reaction that people in general tend to have.
But I think it's also about being mindful about the content that you're putting out, being mindful about your actions when you're in the public spotlight.
Yes.
You shouldn't put yourself in a position that results in cancel culture.
Yeah.
Because you should be mindful about that. You should understand that, wow, my actions might have consequences on how supported I am by the public.
Here's a thought about that. So let's talk about when cancel culture arises. One is someone does something stupid right now, today, and then people say, you know what, you're screwed. They go back to their Twitter feed, they're like, oh, you did some other stuff, you're super screwed, you're super canceled, We're not associating with you. Okay, done.
Super
That's a fair deal. I my personal opinion, I think that's what you're saying too, is like if you mess up, if you do something dumb that warrants it, canceled. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
the issue with this is, let's say you did something stupid 10 years ago, and that gets pulled up. Someone finds a tweet. It's like, yo, you tweeted this? Questionable. You're canceled. Okay. The issue with that is, though that person might have changed, the perspective that most people have on that person via social media, via whatever content that they produce, I think innately has a mistrust of, like, is that genuine? Is that truly you? Is this a persona you're playing? Because I think we've refined how we portray our celebrities. You know, any celebrity has a team of people behind them that help them shape their social image.
Absolutely.
If you were truly a racist basketball team owner, as there has been in the past, and something were to come to light about this, you would be canceled. But if nothing were to come to light presently and something to come to light previously, does cancel culture really have an imperative to act any other way but to assume that you haven't changed? I think that's a deeper question. I mean, in this single case, like this one basketball team owner hadn't changed. There's a Donald something. I forget his name.
I forget.
Yeah.
But
Whatever.
I know who you're referring to.
Yeah.
There was that whole, what was it, like a tape of him talking and dropping the N-bomb.
Really just not
things.
saying nice things.
Some horrible thing.
So that guy should get thrown out. But if that tape had come up, all right, actually that tape was really bad. I'm not even gonna try and whatever.
No, I agree with you.
The tape was horrible.
Harsh.
Okay.
It was pretty harsh.
But if something had happened 10 or 15 years prior that was kind of questionable, not just outright like you're a bigot, but you know, questionable. I think cancel culture still gets aggressive and nips people in the butt. It's like we can't trust any of the image that you've portrayed up to this point, because realistically you have a team of people helping you portray that persona.
Yeah.
Is that even you? We don't know.
Yeah.
You're more likely to be a really crap person than a good person. That's the assumption they rely on. Canceled.
It is very. I guess a good way to put it is cancel culture is very trigger happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? They just anytime anything happens.
I mean that's toxic. That's code for toxic.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And I agree that it's a problem, but I also just don't think that realistically anything's going to happen about it, because what can happen? It's mob mentality at that point.
I mean, what I would hope to have. So this is what I'm bringing up PewDiePie.
Yeah.
So that video that we had talked about. So PewDiePie had a reaction to cancel culture via Jollibee or something. They had a few people come in and talk about cancel culture. PewDiePie reacted to the video. Interesting watch, because he's been on both sides of it, having been canceled and seen people be canceled. He personally saw it as like a mob mentality, mob rule sort of scenario, and his perspective on it was that if the legal system could get involved and kind of hold people accountable, the cancel culture movement wouldn't have as much weight, because people would actually rely on a justice system. But the reality was that these cancel culture pro people didn't view the justice system as actionable, as something to put faith in, and as something to actually hold people accountable.
They felt like they were better.
So R. Kelly's a horrible example, because he was held accountable.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So R. Kelly, put him to the side. Let's take, I don't know, Doja Cat as an example of someone who said some pretty questionable things about black people.
Hey, listen, man. I only know one song by her. Don't point at me.
Okay. But I don't know. I don't know how a judicial court would even hold it up and say, Doja Cat, you are, I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. There's a lot of nuance there. I don't know if the cancel culture will ever go away, but that is one way in which that cancel culture could have been replaced by like a government orchestrated structure.
I think with the social media presence that everybody has now, the connectivity via the internet,
everyone has a voice that can be immediately projected out there. I think
cancel culture is very difficult to get rid of when you have mob mentality in that way, online, connected in that way.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. It's especially with the fact that I think our country does such a job of promoting the idea that everyone has a voice and that your voice can make a difference and that each individual has weight behind what they say, that especially now because of social media, everyone feels like they're almost obligated to put their opinion out there. And it's a lot easier to jump on the bandwagon now. Because back in the 50s, it was, yeah, you had a voice and yeah, your opinion matters and yeah, you have individuality, but
it was more based around your tight circle of
yeah,
people.
maybe your community or your
Right.
town or something. But now it's I
Talk to
could
somebody across the world.
oh yeah,
about
I could
something.
just trash Japan if I wanted by just sending something onto the internet. As hard that's as horrible as that is. It's just there's this easeability to just send anything you want out there into the electronic void, and it's just kind of
Somebody somewhere will probably see it.
Yeah,
Probably.
To reference PewDiePie again, or maybe he didn't say this, I forget, but people talking on the internet is kind of equivalent to people shouting from their cars. And that
wait, who said that? Was it?
have you seen that too?
I think I know what you're talking.
It's
about.
like there isn't any physical, or there isn't any immediate associated physical consequence to your actions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're just shouting, but there is some immediate physical reaction. You know, people are gonna take what you say on the internet and perceive it some way, and react with it, interact with it, and that's something that you should be knowledgeable of when you do say something that could be like cancel culture.
You have to be mindful about it.
You have to be mindful.
I think I know what you're referring to.
Isn't that it's a good metaphor.
No, I
It's
can't
a good
remember who
metaphor.
said it, but maybe I heard a different metaphor. But it was something to the effect of, it's the equivalent. The equivalent of standing in a crowded room of people and just yelling your opinion and hoping that someone walking by or someone in the area is going to pay attention to what you say or agree.
Yeah.
It's like people are going to hear you. And you just hope someone hears you because you think that your opinion should
Somebody
be out there.
will probably listen.
Yeah.
Because just based on sheer numbers alone, chances are one person is going to listen to you.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I haven't posted on my Instagram for I think over a year or something. But the thing is that if I do post on it, I know that there are still people like you and Derek and I guess you don't have Instagram anymore, but I know Derek and maybe some other people I associate with are gonna see it.
If they see it.
And the 20 people, and the 20 people I have on Snapchat are probably gonna see what I post. So yeah, it's this idea that no matter what, if you have anyone following you, someone's gonna see it.
But it can also get quote unquote lost in the void.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
Put it out there.
Well, especially if you're posting on something that you don't have a direct association.
Like podcasts.
So let's say...
Well, there's that.
Let's say we post to the Time for Anything Reddit, r/Time for Anything.
Yeah.
Currently, there are no followers.
Right.
Because it's not a public... Well, it is public, but we haven't advertised the Reddit at all. If we post onto that, the only people that are going to see it are me, Phil, and Derek.
Yeah.
Because those are the only people that follow it.
Yep.
So in that instance, nobody's going to see it.
Yeah, or like you post a comment on PewDiePie's video and maybe there's just so many comments, no one's going to see it.
If you post a comment on a Reddit post that was posted 24 hours ago and it's on the front page and everything. It's not even on the front page. It's just like buried and new.
Oh, yeah.
Posted 24 hours ago. Chances are nobody's going to see it.
Yeah, except for who posted it, but I see your point.
If they have notifications on, if they even use Reddit. I think that it's easy to post something on the internet and it gets seen by nobody. And it's also easy to post something on the internet and it gets seen by some people.
Yes.
I think it's at that point just luck of the draw.
Let me spark a transition. So let's take this.
You're not allowed. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Okay, let's take this discussion of what people post on the internet and take it from the perspective of service providers. So now we're talking about Google, Facebook, Twitter. That beautiful Google lawsuit that came out. Oh my.
What was the with the whole thing?
Some Bill Barr search engine monopoly type.
No. That internet providers can restrict access to websites if they want to, what is it?
Your ISP can do that. Yeah.
No. It was a change in the law that happened.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
Yes, this was a huge net neutrality. Yep. Yeah, net neutrality. You don't remember the whole net neutrality thing?
Pie from like a year and a half ago?
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah.
I was talking about the Google lawsuit that came out like 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
Did you not hear about that?
I didn't hear about that.
You didn't hear about that?
I didn't hear about that.
I heard about a Google lawsuit.
Bill Barr, the Attorney General of the United States, brought a lawsuit
not
to
be
Google.
Confused with Bill Burr.
Same person.
Not even.
No. Bill Barr.
Big Barr. Attorney General Barr.
Okay.
So he brought a lawsuit to Google that said, hey, you're signing up with deals for Apple so that iPhones come out with Google as the default search browser. That's illegal. That violates the Sherman Act, which is anti-monopoly. You're a monopoly. And Google's out here like, yo, man, even if we didn't set up a default search browser for $90 billion with Apple or something like that, people would choose Google. That's their counter argument.
That's their argument is
That's
either way,
actually
people are
pretty
going to
true.
choose Google.
Because if you're just generally searching the internet, Google is
I'm using
generally
Bing.
speaking.
Oh wait,
Way to
I
go.
mean Google.
DuckDuckGo.
DuckDuckGo is
best.
really good, but
The best.
But most people use Google.
No, so here's what I want to do. I want to say you guys can be Facebook. I'll be Facebook. You guys be anti-Facebook. Let's discuss how we regulate social media posts that may or may not include like racism, anti-Semitism, inciting violence or paranoia, like that type of stuff. Like if you post on Facebook, hey, they're stealing ballots from the Philadelphia ballot boxes, Twitter should flag your post and say,
this is misinformation.
yeah, there's no information that, says this is true.
Which actually, currently the election is in full swing. People are calling for Trump's ban on Twitter because of his misinformation that he's posting.
Okay, but not to get into politics.
No, that's not even political, right?
Okay,
If
fair.
he's
It is
posting
objectively
misinformation,
happening. Yeah.
right.
Okay. But I want to talk about that. So I'll make Google's case or Facebook's case first as to why, there's this perceived anti-conservative bias. So the algorithms that Facebook and Google and Twitter use is if people click on something a lot more than other things, then we should advertise that, quote unquote advertise, which basically means we should show that as the first result.
Yeah, it gets pushed up in the queue of
Correct.
popular.
So if people
or
keep
something.
clicking on QAnonisreal.com and they keep clicking on that, maybe because people at the time are like, this is bogus. There's no way this is real. I want to see what they're saying. Skeptical minded people.
They click on it.
They click on it. They keep clicking on it. Now you have naive people who don't have set beliefs, aren't sure, and they start interacting with the system that has already been primed by skeptical people clicking on this bogus website. They click on the website that pops up first, and they go, "Oh, this has to be real. This was the first thing Google showed me. I trust Google. They're such a good search engine."
I see what you're getting at.
So here becomes an interesting debate over where social media and search engines, what is the cutoff when they hand users a search result or a social media post? Where do they leave the responsibility to provide information to the user? Do they have to check the information? Do they have to inform the user about where the information is coming from? What is the nuance of that system? That is what's being debated all over the country, and what is now going to hopefully be opened up by this court case with Google. That's my personal opinion.
Maybe this is a new thing that we have to start pushing into our education system in school is, 20 years ago, you didn't have to tell people, make sure you fact check stuff that's being posted on social media, because you know what? Social media wasn't a thing 20 years ago like it is right now. So maybe now you need to be educating people on, hey, you shouldn't be believing something just because it's the top result on Google. Maybe you should be doing your research. So maybe it's not even...
We've been telling people that since the beginning of the internet,
yes,
the beginning of Google.
Since newspapers, since anything.
People just are going to believe it anyway.
But it's,
I would actually counter. Here's an interesting idea. It is now very easy to get a hold of articles and opinions that contradict mainstream opinions. So the
Yes.
argument for fake news
Yes.
is actually extremely strong.
Okay.
Any piece of political news, you're able to find an article that refutes it or refutes it and repudiates it and basically says this is why they made the article and why they're wrong. And your ability to find that easily on a page that might have 20,000 views really enhances the security of your search or your perceived security and makes you believe that, you know, this could be real.
But the problem is that with the increase in easeability of access of information
Yeah,
via media, that's only going to increase.
exactly.
There's almost nothing you can do about it, in my mind. It's just you're gonna have ignorant, uneducated people believing anything that's out there and even doing more digging for information that counters the popular quote-unquote right belief. So it's almost like, do you even do anything?
I think this is where we're at now.
How do you do
Yeah.
anything?
What is a fact?
I think a lot of people
What is a fact?
What is
Yeah.
a fact?
they look
Yeah.
for articles that play into their confirmation bias
Yes.
and don't dig any further than that. And if they find something that refutes what they believe, they just disregard it as misinformation.
It's easy to find something that refutes the refutation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so much information on both sides of any argument or any belief, right? Let's just global warming or climate change, right? You can find an ample amount of information that supports the idea that climate change is real and caused by humans. But you can also find ample amount of information that claims that climate change is
Bogus.
propaganda
Yep.
and that it's not caused by humans. So then what do you believe? And when you have this just idea in your head, right? I believe that climate change is real. So I go to the internet and I look for articles specifically telling me that yes, climate change is real.
Yeah.
And I don't give any time of day to the articles that say it's not.
Here's I think the worst part too is that the people trying to say what's factual, what's not factual, e.g. politicians, right? Scientists don't have my ear. I don't follow any scientist podcast. So politicians are saying what's real, what's not real. They're not experts in any of these fields.
Right.
They also suffer from the same confirmation bias
Yes.
that the general populace suffers.
Absolutely.
From they're
Or
essentially
they're just told from their party.
or they're
what to-
like whatever
what to
they
say,
they have
yeah.
even more influencing factors. So what you're essentially seeing is no connection to truth. I mean, hypothetically, no connection to truth.
I see what you're getting at.
You know, there it's not necessary. It's not in the process. You could put it in. You could have politicians that go, "We're looking for the facts. I'm going to do my own research studies." Crap like that. Are you necessarily going to have that? No, probably not. I don't see that happening. But it's an interesting dilemma. So what does that leave you with?
Too much information.
Too much information.
On any side.
Yeah.
Right. There comes a point where there's just so much information that you can't determine what's real and what's not.
What is a fact?
What is a fact? And, yeah.
Twitter bot army makes facts. That's
Yes.
my final statement.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. It's a dilemma we're facing, and it is a concerning one because never in human existence has information been both so available and so hidden. No one would have spent the time in the Middle Ages to write an incorrect book. No one would have written a fake. I shouldn't say that because there are mythologies.
There's fiction, yes.
Yeah, but no one would have written a fake history that has historical and faked accounts combined.
Unless it's explicitly fictional.
Yes.
Right?
But now it is easy to do that. And it is, in fact, beneficial to do that.
Yeah.
It is beneficial
Most of the time. Yeah.
for a foreign adversarial government to create fake
Yeah.
articles, fake information, and try to sway a population that is susceptible to it. And so what do? I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that. I think a lot of people are struggling with it. That is the double-edged sword of free information exchange
Maybe
over the
that's
internet.
maybe that's where we need AI.
Maybe.
And this is a stretch, okay. But I'm wondering what if you had an AI that was quote unquote intelligent enough that it could sift through all the data itself. Anything that's ever been written, that's ever been on the internet about climate change. And then the AI determines what's real and what's not. That's kind of terrifying. Because
But then the AI is the arbiter of truth. How do you know the AI is correct?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because
Okay.
you could have more articles being written that just so happen to be quote unquote more convincing that climate change isn't true.
Yeah.
And then the AI goes, well, based on the results, it seems that climate change isn't true. But it could turn out that climate change is, and it probably is.
I mean, here's
true. So that's what
here's the issue with
either
AI.
way, you can't actually determine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
The issue with AI at its core, as we see it now, is that it is inherently just an advanced human written program.
Yes.
If you want your AI to believe climate change is false, so easy to do.
Yeah.
If you want it to believe climate change is true, so easy to do.
You
If you
just
want it to
make
have no
it do
opinion,
that.
other people will decide what your AI believes for you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so someone at some point has to tell it what is factual,
Yeah, that's true.
or you have to have an AI that just discerns facts.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
again, you can't.
If it's able to discern facts without human input, then
it's
you have created
essentially-
God.
Yeah, I was just
You've
about to
created
say,
God.
Yeah. So there's no way around it really. It's really just
a huge
educating
problem.
the people to use their judgment.
But where do
Yeah.
they go? Because now you have two sides. Let's say you have newspapers, right? Newspapers, magazines that have for years been popular as sources of valuable, straight news information.
Okay.
Now you have new magazines and newspapers popping up that say, yo, those old ones, yeah, they're actually extremely biased. They're actually incorrect about a lot of things.
Like we could literally just start a news
Fair.
website if
Yeah.
we wanted.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, that's part of the problem too, right? It's
Yeah.
ease of access.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's some digital ways around this. Like, I think, I don't know enough about these things, but digital contracts provide an interesting scenario, I think, for secure information transfer and, like, tracking, like, how information gets propagated around the web. I don't know how that'd be implemented, but it is an interesting idea to see, like, where information arises from. But I don't know. I think it's a really open problem right now. I think if you're listening to this, you should definitely give your time to think about this. This is like equivalent to the mailman problem. It's worth billions of dollars if you find a good solution.
Elaborate on that.
Like the mailman problem, or like,
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Oh, I'm probably not using the right name. Essentially, let's say this: you are trying to deliver packages to every major city in the United States. Let's say there are 50 of them in the lower 48. Writing an algorithm and or finding a route that is optimal for traveling to each one of these cities is borderline impossible.
These are traffic patterns, right?
No, it's because there's no good way, at least the way this problem is set up. I'm probably missing a good portion of the problem set up. There's no good way to say, I'll go to city A first as opposed to city C first.
I see what you're getting at.
And connect, should I go from A to C, then to B, or A to B to C, then does that set me up to go to city D? There's a lot of ways to break down the problem.
It's almost like you're trying to figure out, well, I got to hit these stores when I go to King of Prussia.
Yeah.
What's the most efficient, where's the most efficient way to park and then the most efficient way to navigate? Like, there are so many possibilities, and probably no matter what, you're going to have to end up going out of your way. So it's like, which way is actually going to be the most efficient? You can't really even figure it out. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
That is the essence of the problem. So the problem is finding the most optimal solution. In reality, obviously mail gets delivered pretty efficiently. We don't need the most optimal delivery solution. We just need a kind of good one. So this is a problem that's existed for a long time. There's no great solutions to it. But if you find one, then you've theoretically cracked one of the hardest programming problems that has ever existed. So, merit. There you go. Yo, let me give you guys an idea of physics that I read about in a book. I think I talked to you guys about this previously, but it's kind of interesting. So, the way physics has been developed up to this time period is that, especially Newtonian physics, if you take an ideal scenario, Newtonian physics essentially simulate that scenario. If you throw a ball up and down...
You've told me about this before, but continue because this is incredibly interesting.
So physics is essentially trying to simulate the known universe. The issue with that is we can't really know what's going to happen at any period of time in the future because we don't know our quote-unquote starting conditions to simulate the universe. Let's say you describe weather physically. You'd have to know like humidity at every location. You'd have to know temperature at every location, wind speed at every location, and this expands to surrounding areas too because it's a whole global network. And maybe you'd want to go beyond that. Let's talk about like the mass of the Earth, the mass of the Moon, the mass of the Sun, and how gravity plays into that. Let's talk about more than that, like human interacting with the ecosystem. Let's say you have a factory that shuts down for an hour for some time period, and that So again, like the reality of the way physics has been built up. I forget why this came up earlier, but I did want to bring it up at one point. Was physics is simulation based. Technology, I think, is advancing towards becoming like a really heavily simulation based technology, whether that's virtual reality, augmented reality, or just prototyping. I know like when I spent some time working at a robotics firm, a lot of the work we did wasn't making a robot. It was making a virtual robot and seeing how it reacted to simulations because that's a hell of a lot cheaper than building a robot and seeing it blow up, So, I mean, these are all thoughts that come to mind about simulations and like their importance both in like engineering, in industry, commercial activities, and then really physics, which has been a simulation-dominated field for a long time. I think there might be a shift in that at one point. I don't know. I've been reading about this chaotic physics thing for a while, like using chaos to describe physical scenarios. It's not the same, I guess, granularity as physics that says, at time 1 second, you'll be at this exact position. There isn't the same, I guess, detail, but what chaos would describe is you should be within these ranges for X time, and for X1 time, and for X2 time. You'll be within these other ranges, and that is a known fact. And that is what that says. I don't know if that's particularly valuable, but it's an interesting thought.
Elaborate more on that, though. Like, where were you kind of going? Did you have...
No, someone brought up physics like 15 minutes in, and I was like, oh, this is a weird thought I think I brought up, but I hadn't really explored a whole lot. Oh, no, you know what it was? It was the drone thing. If you simulate robots, you're simulating drones.
Right.
Those are all based on physical scenarios. We have the technology, we have the scientific theory to already do all that crap. We don't need relativity or quantum to simulate drones, blowing up a building. You don't need any of that. We're not moving at light speed. I don't know. I think it just... I'm genuinely worried about the world in 20 years. You're going to have a technocracy that takes over. I actually believe that. If it's not China, it's going to be the U.S. It's going to be some other country that's like basically said, we got 5 years. Not even 5. We got 1 year ahead in drone technology. Game changer.
Yeah, we own everything.
Yeah. What are you going to do? You're going to send your, 50-person squad to shoot down my 50 drone squad? It's not happening.
Yeah.
It's not happening. We don't need to sleep. We can attack it. Like, I don't know. It's such a scary
that's
time to live in.
Well, and at that point, the only people that might be militarized are the ones doing the repairs. But even then, you can almost have an endless cycle of machines repairing machines, and then those machines repair those machines. I mean, at some point, you almost don't need people anymore.
I mean, I think that plays into the specialization thing too, right?
You say
Skills.
potentially, but the thing is that people rely on people, and we don't need machines to sustain people. So at some point, it would be likely that you get to the point where machines keep machines sustained, and you don't need people to sustain machines.
Potentially.
I mean, potentially, if that's the way it goes. But that's like some Terminator shit.
Because machines come after people. So yeah, people don't need machines because people existed without machines, but machines did not exist without people.
Yeah, I guess, but I guess I'm imagining a world in which machines learn how to be
And I'm saying that
self-sufficient.
that's a potential, but I just can't objectively say that that's going to happen.
Yeah,
no,
I
I'm not
also,
saying it's
Right.
gonna happen. I'm just
Right,
thinking that's terrifying to
Sure.
think about that.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
the point where we just
it's
become
not
entirely
beyond
obsolete.
scope. It's not beyond scope
No.
of the tech available right now.
That's why it's
That's
potential.
crazy. That's crazy.
Potential.
Not that they'll be intelligent and like, you know, doing really sus stuff. I don't think it's that hard to like make a robot that says I'm gonna
Physically,
charge myself when my battery's low. You know, that's not weird.
That's not weird.
That's
that
not
makes
weird.
perfect sense.
Yeah, that's like the first step.
Because that's the extent of its quote-unquote thought.
Or programming or whatever. Yeah.
It's
yeah.
saying my battery is low, therefore I will charge myself. But beyond that, it's not saying I have a full battery, let me enslave the human race.
Yeah. That's actually, I argued with my dad about this for a while, but I'm starting to think he's more right. He basically said, my argument was artificial intelligence is too stupid, too low level, and too unequipped to really come up with the abstract thoughts to conceptualize human society and then begin, kind of wiring itself to say, I'm going to conquer human society in these ways that make sense, that will actually allow me to accomplish. Like, that's such a huge jump from the AIs we have now that basically say, that's a hat, or that guy's wearing a blue shirt.
It's all about the already pre-inputted information.
Yeah.
It's not gaining information on its own.
But
Yeah. But this is what my dad said. He said, you have essentially a stupid AI. If you just expand its network and you just make it more and more and more and more complicated to the nth degree, you will just eventually realize consciousness. What is consciousness but a really advanced classifier like
I guess
that?
if you expand it to the nth degree, though. Right?
Yeah,
But
and so
that's if you can get it there.
And so I said, at first I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, AI is dumb. We'll never get that far. But his hypothetical is the technology arrives at the point where we can simulate that sort of stuff and simulate those networks interacting. And so at that point, I go, we've never even experimented with behavior of networks like that.
Right, that's,
Maybe. Yeah, why not? Why wouldn't it work like
It's a
that? Our
potential.
brains aren't like, our brains evolve the same way.
because you have to think about just the physical barrier that may or may not be there.
Sure.
Right? We haven't done it yet, therefore we do not know if it's even physically capable of being done.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's a possibility because we haven't gotten to that point.
Yeah.
We haven't encountered the barrier that we could potentially encounter, the glass wall or whatever
Ceiling,
it is.
yeah.
No,
Glass
not
ceiling.
glass ceiling. The universe and the alien.
The filter.
The glass filter, yeah.
Great filter.
The great filter. The
Yeah.
fuck,
oh, yeah. Well, yeah, the great.
Right,
That's what you're talking
right.
about, the great filter.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just relating that to a potential barrier in the future for AI because
Okay.
we haven't gotten there yet. We don't
Yeah.
know if there's that great filter, quote unquote, for AI. We just don't know, and we can
Yeah.
like to believe that it's possible, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, you physically do not and cannot know until it happens.
Until it happens.
Here's a hot take for you guys. My ECE background. Apple just released an iPhone 12 with a 5 nanometer chip. That is very small. That means that each of the transistors are 5 nanometers long. That means that physical concepts like quantum tunneling, which I don't even understand, but essentially neutralize the effectiveness of a transistor because it's too small and your electrons will just go straight through the material. So concepts like quantum tunneling will negate the effectiveness of smaller transistors. But I will say researchers have made smaller ones. I just don't think they're manufacturable.
On a mass scale.
On a mass
But,
scale.
Yeah.
This will open up the way to quantum computing as the way forward. I do think that if quantum computing becomes feasible and commercially available, you will start to see neural networks become very advanced. And perhaps even, this is actually a very interesting concept. I don't know, we're really just digging into this right now, but the idea of like a passive tool versus an active tool. A passive tool is a pencil. You use the pencil to draw something. An active tool might be someone you hire to paint. You walk into the room and they've already created something for you. Or you go to them and you say, I want a tree. and they'll create a painting with a tree for you. That's an active tool. I think that's something we're edging towards. That's not a fully autonomous AI, but that is an advanced AI that I think quantum computing could unlock. I don't know, just thoughts about the whole idea.
Man, yeah, I think that's where James and I differ on the whole AI thing. Is I remember having a conversation with him at one point saying that he doesn't think, and this is what you thought at the time. Who knows if your viewpoint is different currently, but your thought process was that he doesn't think AI can get to the point where they can essentially create and. For example, AI creating music, not just creating music in a formulaic sense, but creating music in a way that's maybe driven by passion and creativity, and then
Emotion and feeling.
Emotion, feeling. But I'd like to think that it could get to that point. But what's scary is if it's at that point, how advanced is everything else, right?
They could have go farther.
I just think in the end of it, any computer-based system, AI or robot, whatever, primarily AI in this sense, is going to use logic and not regard any type of emotion.
But hold on. Didn't you say that you're a believer of the simulation theory in which we're in a simulation?
I mean, it's pretty metaphysical, so I'm going to say no. But I think it's possible that this is a simulation, sure.
I guess I'm just thinking, if we are in a simulation, however that may be, however it is that we are in a computer, if that is the case, then it is therefore inherently true that an AI can get to that point.
In a universe or dimension outside of ours, sure.
Not necessarily. Why not?
Well, because if our universe is created by a computer or a simulation that exists outside of our universe and therefore does not have to follow any of the physics or logic that we know in this universe. And even if it does,
we've been given restrictions.
Then that means our emotions are simulated and are not real, which is extremely possible in my mind. I don't believe in emotions like, well, I think emotions are more of a biological trick for ourselves. It's more about just how our mental capacity has expanded so far to, for example, love. I don't believe that love is a real thing. I think it's a biological trick to get us to procreate. Same thing with the feeling of happiness and depression and everything, right? It's a stimulus and response.
But it's still a thing.
No, it's not a thing. It's not tangible, right? Emotions are not tangible.
Well, not just because it's not tangible doesn't mean it's not a thing.
A thing defines a tangible object.
Not necessarily.
Concept.
Concept defines an intangible object.
Let's just say concept.
But a thing, like
but
a chair is a thing. A microphone is a thing.
But a concept is a thing.
A thing is a noun. A noun relates to a
no more vernacular. Okay. Get this out of here.
That's the thing.
Well, but, I mean, if you don't follow definitions, then there's no point in talking.
Wait, here's I used to be on your side, James, but I have not recently, but over time started to shift my perspective. Primarily because, when you think about it, what is it that sets human brains apart from anything else? Nothing. It's a biological / chemical reaction that happens inside an enclosed space that happens to produce certain results consistently. So what does that remind you of? Oh, I don't know. Maybe a computer?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, so the difference between the two, as I see them, is complexity. The brain has just untold complexity compared to any computer we design today. And part of that is evolution. We've we've evolved our brain to react in ways that we've never asked our computing technology to, progress in. And that's fine. I acknowledge that. I just having crystallized this belief that the human brain is essentially a biological chemical series of processes interacting in like this enclosed environment.
Biological computer.
Essentially, and there's studies done on that. That's again like so when you look at the origins of artificial intelligence, they come from cognitive science, right? The study of the human brain originated artificial intelligence because people said, "My God, this is a process that we could recreate with our technology and computers," and they were completely right.
At
They
a
were
lower level than...
Agreed. No, but like, what is separating scientists and technologists from saying, "Oh, we'll just make it more complicated"? Again, our current limitations, fine. I agree with you 100%. That's why I bring up the idea of quantum computing, advanced computing processes, and advanced hardware manufacturing processes. I think once we reach those points, really the border between human brains and computing begins to seem kind of faint without some spiritual attachment to human brains.
It's gonna become fuzzy.
That's so. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen even in our lifetimes. I truly believe that this is a future development. But if I acknowledge these quote unquote facts, which again we don't know what facts are anymore, but if we acknowledge these quote unquote facts, then we have to acknowledge that the human brain really isn't so far away from computer artificial intelligence, except for complexity and I guess goals.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying, and that's kind of why like initially I sided with you. I was like, I argued with my dad for like an hour. I said no, AI will never be humans. We're too complicated. We're too objective. No one in their right mind would create an AI that would mimic humans. But at this point, I'm kind of
physically possible. We don't know if we can create something that's more complex than ourselves, because we just don't know.
That's fair.
It's possible that we really just can't. No, we can't go beyond what is physically possible for us.
Yeah. I will say though that like one issue with that like creating complexity is that when early researchers created like classification algorithms for let's classify stop signs and yield signs for like let's say you work for Tesla and you're working on their autonomous driving program.
Okay.
We want to classify traffic signs, right? That's not something you went into and we're like, okay, we're going to use this schema, this setup, this number of nodes, this number of connections between the nodes, this number of layers to create this framework. At least I really doubt they did that because that would be incredible foresight. What more likely happened was they just tried out a bunch of different methodologies and we said, oh my God, like this network just weighted itself really well. It just works. It evolved the right way, as opposed to our other networks, which evolved horribly and or just not as well as this one. And that is really the nature of AI research. It's not people coming in with like brilliant ideas like I'm gonna program this node this way and this node that. Yeah, essentially they'll say I'm gonna make a node, I'm gonna have my test data, and I'm just gonna have my node framework just train on my test data 100 different times, and the best one I'm just gonna say, well, that's the best it can get, and that's a great framework. And that's a low level AI you're talking about. It's like that'll never compare to humans. Agreed. I was 100% behind that. I just don't know if the complexity that we're at now is really going to be defining for the complexity that AI is at for the rest of our lives.
And I don't know either. I just wonder if it's even possible, right? Because we don't know if we can get more complex than we as organisms can even comprehend.
Yeah.
So, I guess in the end, as with everything, we just don't know. I have to wait and see.
That's fair too.
There's a lot smarter people working on a lot of stuff. A lot smarter than me. Working on things that I could never work on. That might have more of the answers, but just at this point, it's
way in the future.
It's way in the future.
Yeah.
It's up in the air. We can't speak definitively one way or the other.
It's a weird thought.
Yeah.
It's a weird thought. I guess what I want to sum up today's conversation is pick a niche that no one else would pick because it's really particular. Because that's the future.
In that skill.
Because that's the future.
Yeah.
Back to skills.
Child biomodification.
Yeah. Just work on it and stick with it.
Man, we covered
so you become the best.
Yeah.
Covered like 9 different topics.
It's a solid.
More than that. We covered a
Yeah.
lot of stuff today.
Anything
Solid.
goes, man.
Anything goes.
Anything goes.
Hey, Rohan.
Hmm.
Thanks for being on the show.
Super happy. This has been so fun.
Thanks for coming and talking with us.
Mm-hmm.
We'll catch you guys in the next one. You got any final words?
I think I just gave him, but I guess my final thought would be not only in this podcast, but I wouldn't be surprised if anything goes in this world. I think we've lived in a relatively peaceful time, and I'm worried. I'm worried that something crazy might happen.
In May, something's gonna
Something
happen.
crazy might happen.
Something
But maybe it
crazy
won't.
might
Maybe it
happen,
won't because we can't know. That's my final thought.
Yeah, we can't know.
We
I
can't
like
know.
it.
There you go. Apple might take over Madagascar, or it may just sell an iPhone 13. I don't know.
I don't know. On that note, I don't know.
Nobody knows
No one
anything, but anything goes.
But anything goes.
Anything
Bye.
goes.
Goodbye.